Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So, for starters, this is going to be an MTG channel. I'll be talking about my opinions on maybe new cards, what some deck ideas would be for Standard, Modern, possibly Legacy. Don't really play that format that much. Bit expensive, but it does seem like a very interesting format. Brainstorm is a pretty good card, if I have to say so myself. So with Banned and Restricted coming out on Monday, I'll be going through some of the ins and outs of what I think is going to be banned, unbanned, and maybe some new decks that'll come out of that. So first, I think going through KCI, that deck has a pretty absurd win rate. I believe at like 58, 59, 60%. It is the best deck. I don't really like using that term, but the best deck in Modern at the moment. And so I think there's going to be a card banned out of that. The card that I would assume would be banned would probably be KCI, because banning anything else is going to affect other decks. Or if you ban Scrap Trawler or Psy, which is probably not a good idea, but if you ban one of those two, the deck will still survive and it'll still be a very it's going to take a different form, is what I'm saying. It's going to still be one of the top decks. It's just going to be a different sort of form. Because if you ban something like Psy, then it'll become a more linear combo deck and try to just go for the Scrap Trawler Mirror Retriever win, which isn't really the best thing for Modern. Well, if you ban Scrap Trawler, the deck will become more resilient to hate, and I think both of those aren't good options. And when you start going and banning the other cards that are used in other decks, like Ancient Stirrings, there's going to be a problem. Because you want Tron to survive and Amulet Titan, both decks that use Ancient Stirrings, and banning Ancient Stirrings is going to hurt those decks, and those decks are perfectly fine. People might be like, oh, Tron, oh, it's so bad, but Tron already has a whole ton of hate in the format, and it's not even oppressive if you, in game one. Like, yeah, it's good, and it does have a very good first game matchup, but I wouldn't call it something as like a turn 3 kill or turn 4 kill. Your opponent can still counter stuff if they're control, and they can still kill you if you are at a low enough life total. Wurmcoil Engine can stop that. Card's a lot better. I think it should be ran more of a 3 of rather than a 1 or 2 of, which I do see in a lot of Tron lists now. So that's that for Ancient Stirrings, and I think there was another card in the list that sort of fits into other decks. Forgot what that was. Oh, the Star and Sphere. Star and Sphere, they'd only ban one of them, but I don't feel like those are impactful enough to ban. So, and that also hurt Tron a whole ton. So that's definitely not going to get the hammer. So moving on to something which I've been thinking about for a long time is looking at unbans. So personally, I am a huge fan of 3 cards which are unbanned but need to be unbanned, which are Birthing Pod, Stoneforge Mystic, and Splinter Twin. So let's go in order. Birthing Pod is a toolbox card or a combo card. For those who don't know, I'll put the card image right here. And so what Birthing Pod is used for is it's sort of you're going to fill your deck with a whole bunch of 1-ofs for every single situation, and then you'll be able to deal with a lot of situations because it was a toolbox deck. So the card was oppressive in Standard and Modern at the time because it was able to deal with a lot of different decks, and it was a very prevalent toolbox deck. And it was so good that it was just like, well, what are we going to do against this? So the card got banned. I think it's been enough time to where Modern has the proper aggressive tools to deal with Birthing Pod, and the control tools are also good enough to deal with Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod is going to be a good deck if it does get unbanned, and you can bet that I'm probably going to be playing it. But I do believe that the tools that we have already, like in Jund and Abzan and Blue-White and Tron, the deck is going to be good, but it is not going to kill the format. And I think it will actually benefit the format as a whole. So moving on to the next topic is Stoneforge Mystic. So I think SFM probably should have been unbanned a while ago because the card is a little bit too slow. Like, let's look at Legacy, for example. Stoneforge Mystic is prevalent in the Stoneblade decks. And the Stoneblade decks are not so super strong because they're a little bit too slow for the format. Modern is effectively as fast as Legacy while not being as interactive as Legacy. I could be a little bit wrong about that as I don't play Legacy that much. Yeah, it turns out I'm a little bit wrong on that. Like there's Storm and then there's like Tin Fins and some of the faster decks. But you kind of get what I mean when it comes to like the more popular decks like Delver and the more control decks. But Stoneforge Mystic isn't a huge threat in Legacy. And Jace is in Modern and is doing decently well. And so I do know that Stoneforge Mystic can go ahead and tutor up Batterskull and then put it onto the battlefield. But the problem with people having that mindset is that you have to play Stoneforge Mystic. Sure, you have it. You go tutor up your Batterskull. You didn't lose any card advantage, and that is nice. However, if you are not able to go ahead and put that card onto the battlefield on the next turn, which it's a 1-2, it could easily get bolted, it could easily get pushed. There are a lot of cards that could just kill Stoneforge Mystic, and so going ahead and tutoring up your Batterskull, like, you're going to have a 5-drop in your hand, and if you are able to put it down, it is going to be super good against the mid-range decks, and will probably be able to outgrind the control decks if you have other tools in your hand. But I don't think it is strong enough to remain banned. And that's my intake on Stoneforge Mystic. Stoneforge Mystic can also get swords, which like Sword of Fire and Ice is probably the best sword in my opinion, as it will kill your opponent's stuff and let you draw cards, along with Pro Blue and Pro Red. Pro Red is super important, while Pro Blue is a little bit iffy. I guess can't be blocked by Snap, maybe a few other cards. But I think in general, Stoneforge Mystic is a perfectly safe and fine unban. Since it's just it's going to be good, but it's a little bit too slow for the format. Because when you have Hardened Skills Affinity, you have Burn, you have Jund decks, which have Bloodbraid, which is already an extremely fast card. Liliana can deal with it. You're going to have a 5-drop sitting in your hand, which is, and we can all agree that Batterskull isn't the best to play on 5. When you look at other 5-drops and 4-drops, you kind of don't want to be playing Batterskull. And there's always that off chance that you could draw a Batterskull, and that's just going to be a mess. And so it is going to be strong, but it's not going to be it shouldn't stay banned. So moving on, finally, which is something which I've been contemplating for a while now, is Splinter Twin. So Splinter Twin is a gross card. I will not deny that. Splinter Twin is very powerful, and Splinter Twin will generate not infinite, a lot of value, and can infinitely kill your opponent on turn 4. And I think when it comes to that, it's weird because Splinter Twin wasn't the best deck at the time. Splinter Twin was a very good deck. And Splinter Twin was a more or so, the ban was a meta change. Because Splinter Twin was shifting the meta, people were building their decks differently around it. And that's the whole thing, is that it was simply just a meta shift. The deck wasn't too strong, there are answers for it, and you when you play Splinter Twin, there is a chance that you can get 2 for 1, and you can basically get time walked. And, excuse me, that's the whole issue with Splinter Twin. And the card is amazing because you can Pestermite, end step, tap something down, and then next turn Splinter Twin win. Yes, that is very powerful. But the fact that your opponent can deal with it in a lot of different ways, and that the combo is fast, but it is also, it can be interrupted fairly easily, as it does deal with creatures, and creatures are dealt with a lot easier than other permanents. And so I think that Splinter Twin is a safe unban. I think it's probably the most like shakiest, and if just Stoneforge and Birthing Pod got unbanned, which I think is going to end up happening because I believe that Splinter Twin is it is shaky. And the reason why it is shaky is that it is a turn 4 kill. It will be able to kill those like hardened scales, like the mono green aggro decks. Well, it is a mono green aggro deck technically, but it's more affinity based. And if you're going up against stuff like spirits or humans, more spirits than humans, it's going to be very good against those types of decks. And there's also the weird issue of it slots very well into a lot of Blue Moon decks, which are already doing pretty well. I think it would just take the slot of Through the Breach Emrakul, which is already sort of a 5-mana win the game. While this combo is faster, I think it will boot those decks to a higher and more prominent level. So now I'm going to take the other side of cards that people are begging to be banned that are perfectly fine. Let's talk about Jace. Jace is so slow. I play blue-white. The deck, I haven't finished building it yet. It's nearly done. But Jace is a very key card in that deck. And the thing is, that deck isn't gross. If we go ahead and go to statistics, blue-white control happens to be about 2.26% of the meta, and Jeskai being the exact same 2.26% of the meta. So if you want to go ahead and talk about popularity, the deck is about, and Jeskai is even more of a mid-range type deck that sometimes doesn't even run Jace. It should, but not always the case. And so that's about 5% of the meta. The deck does have a decent win rate. I think it's about like 52, 53. And so that's fantastic and all, but Jace shouldn't be banned. He only sees play in those slower decks, and people were trying to brew like some weird Sultai, maybe Teamer mid-range decks with Jace, and those didn't work. And when you ban Jace, again, blue-white's going to fall in the ranks as some of the more aggressive, more combo-y, more mid-rangey decks will be able to either outspeed or sometimes even outvalue a control deck if Jace isn't there. Jace was an extremely safe unban, and he isn't causing any ripples or issues in the format. And he's also, as a matter of fact, bringing up blue-black fairies. I've been seeing a lot more at my LGS and other areas, and the deck's fantastic with Jace. Jace is putting that deck together, which is very nice. The blue-black fairies is a very underrated deck, which I think should be seeing a lot more play than it is at the moment. So Jace is a perfectly safe card, and anyone who says that it should be banned is completely wrong. Moving on to some other cards that I believe are perfectly fine are Tron lands. Why do people want to ban Tron lands is, I don't know. Like, why would you want to ban them? Tron is fine. The deck is good. If you want to go to statistics, Tron happens to be about 3% of the meta, and if you start including some like mono blue, red green, black green, white black, not white black, white green, maybe 7% possibly, and that's fine. Tron is relatively consistent while having a decent power level, but is interrupted fairly easily with Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter, Damping Sphere out of the sideboard. Sometimes Stony Silence, that's kind of questionable. It's pretty bad after they hit Tron, but before then, it's whatever. So Tron is fine. I don't know why you would want to ban Tron, since it isn't destroying any decks. It's not causing any issues. As a matter of fact, it's putting mid-range decks in their place. Mid-range decks at the moment in Modern are pretty good, if I would have to say so myself. They're relatively a safer alternative to control decks if in certain matchups, not always. I play blue-white, I know what the matchups are. And I feel like those are being put in check by Tron. And Tron does have its issues with other decks that are popular in the meta, like the KCI matchup is horrid. That's like, I think it's like 80-20, it's horrible. Maybe Nature's Claim can stop it, but it's not a good matchup. And then again, the deck is probably going to get something banned out of it. But when you then start looking at stuff like, is it Phoenix, or Burn, or Dredge, for example, those decks are going to, most of the time, beat Tron. And if you're a very experienced Tron player, then you might be able to beg differently. But I think overall that the deck itself is fine. It's not causing any problems like KCI is, like Humans was at the time. I'm not sure how it all of a sudden got lowered in popularity. I'm pretty sure the win rate dropped a bit, so that's why it dropped in popularity. But it's not causing any ripples. And for all the other unbanned cards, if you want to go ahead and go to a list, I found an entire list of cards that people are saying would be unbanned. There are obviously some Tron cards that were there, such as Karn, Expedition Map, etc. There's no reason why you'd want to ban those. Tron, as I said, is fine. There's Blood Moon, which does keep Tron in check, and I do think that card is fine, relatively. I don't think Blood Moon should probably have been printed as a card, but where we are in Modern right now, I do believe that it should stay, as it does keep some decks in check, and it does allow people to run more basics, which I think is more healthier for a format like Modern. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and move on to why Valakut. Apparently people want to ban Valakut. I don't know why. Valakut, yeah, if you have 7 lands and you resolve or I think it's 7, 8, somewhere around there, and you play Scapeshift, you win the game. Yeah, that's how it should be. Jace does that. Teferi does that. And Bloodbraid Elf relatively does that based on the board state. That's what happens with 4 and 5 mana cards in Modern. They're not supposed to, let's say, just maybe a 4/4 like in Limited, or tilt the game in your favor. They're supposed to win the game. They're not supposed to, they're not supposed to let the game drag out longer and then you might have the possibility of losing. They are there to win you the game if they're in the correct state. Like Jace Teferi, those, if your opponent has creatures, that's probably not very safe to play based on how much mana you have open, etc., etc. But the thing is that not only do you have to build an entire deck around Scapeshift, you also have to make your mana base clunky. And that's why Valakut is perfectly fine. The deck is not super fun to play up against, but it is healthy for the format, and I don't see a reason why Valakut would have to be banned. Because if you want to also look at statistics, Scapeshift is... Ooh, I even need to expand the page to look at it. Scapeshift happens to be... Well, okay, it's Titan Shift, but bear with me. It's about 2% of the meta, and that isn't very oppressive. The deck's fine, as I said. Primeval Titan, Scapeshift, Valakut, all fine cards. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you like my video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you agree with me, and if you don't agree with me, give me a thumbs down. I'm just kidding. Please give me a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe, because I'll be uploading a lot more Magic the Gathering content. I might do some MTGA, possibly. I'm not a huge fan of MTGO, but I might do it at a point. But thanks for watching.